So we're wondering about exploratory testing and what we see other people commonly miss out, or indeed what we've seen each other miss out or get wrong or do extra or do differently. So yeah, exploratory testing. What goes wrong in it as you do it?
Right. What I see a lot of when I observe other people doing it is they're not really exploring with a purpose, that they're poking around, trying random stuff, and I think that's what gets exploratory testing its bad reputation it certainly had in the past. Whereas I view exploration as something that can be structured with a purpose, and when you take that approach, it can have a thoroughness where you know what you've done and you know what you haven't, and you can convey that to other people. And when I talk to other testers about that or observe them, I don't get that sense at all that they really know what they've done and haven't. They might find some interesting bugs, and they could miss a whole lot of other stuff they could have caught on the way.
So how do you give it structure and purpose then?
Right. Over the years, we've developed what we term our 8-layer testing model, which is a series of different types of testing, going from the simplest things to more complex things. Everything building on what's been done before. But really, the key to it is exploration. To me, is taking whatever it is, whether it's software or something physical, and saying what are the properties of this thing. So, and rather than checking for an outcome, which I think most testers still tend to do, they want to check something against an expected outcome. We're looking at it saying, what is this thing? And what are the properties we can measure? And then afterwards, once we found out about this thing, we consider whether it's right or wrong based on any oracles we've got.
So properties would give you scope, but then you have to have a purpose for exploring that part of that scope.
Right. So the purpose is that any of those properties could be wrong. So if you take, say, a text box, it's got, people look at it as a rectangle and think nothing much of it, because a lot of testers aren't really thinking about the underlying technology. They're viewing the screen as if it's a printed piece of paper, and I encourage people to think more deeply about all the different layers.
You've got to test through the UI.
Through the UI, yeah. Through the HTML layer, which is your content, through the styles, the JavaScript behaviours, all the way down through the protocol layers and transmission off to the server and all the different layers there.
Almost as if you were Black Ops testing. Right? Yeah,
I've heard good things about them. Yes. So a text box has properties like physical height, width, number of characters it contains, the character set it supports. It might have validation rules on it, and I might not know in advance what any of those things should be, but I'm thinking about what those properties could be, how I'm going to measure them and record them, and then how I'm going to tell if they're right or wrong. Now, obviously, you could spend an inordinate amount of time doing that, so we only do it to the extent it's useful, and then that typically reveals a whole load of bugs, and then we might move on to another layer, which might be interactions between things, and then once we're happy with that, we move on to checking the control flow, or not checking, but finding out what the control flow is through a system with business logic.
Yeah.
And so given that time's limited, and you could spend all the time at any one of these layers, we have to make sensible judgments about when we've done enough at one level before moving on to another. And this is our approach. Now, there are alternative approaches to exploration that are entirely different, but we have a purpose, and it helps us know what we've done and what we haven't.
Yep. So the purpose and intent is really important, and the purpose and intent helps you know when you need to stop, because you might have exhausted your purpose, and if you haven't come up with any new ideas as you're testing, then it gives you a reason to stop. But the purpose and intent can also be simple, because you can just say, keep asking yourself, why am I doing this? Do I know what I am doing this for? And continue to ask yourself. And I find the thing that helps me do the purposeful testing is keeping detailed notes. Because the first thing I do in my detailed notes is write down why I'm testing this, what my intent is and what my purpose. And that helps me keep on track and know whether I'm going off track, and then I can decide to follow that decision or just make a note. I can go off track here and then stay on your original intent. Because one of the other things that people commonly miss is not making enough notes and not noting down the right things.
It's that business of having a couple of layers going on in your head at the same time. You've got one part of you that is testing away and another part of you that is reviewing what you've got. If you don't have the notes, or even if you don't have a purpose, that level that is reviewing what you've got goes off and gets bored and does something else. It doesn't really care about the testing anymore. Whereas if you've got something that constantly reminds you, I am trying to do this, I'm empathizing with this person, or I'm looking at this style of technology, I'm looking at it in this way, and you've got your notes to review, you are just giving yourself a little feedback loop all the time about what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that really helps.
And you're constantly recognising the decisions that you're making. Because sometimes we skip over decisions, we just make them and just keep going.
It's very hard to recognise decisions until you practice it. It's really strange. When I get people to write down the decisions they're making as they go, some people write down nothing. And I say, did you make no decisions? And they say, I don't really know. And it's a little bit like saying to people, what do you feel, when they've not explored in emotion from the point of view, you know, what do you feel? Sometimes you don't really know, you just feel a bit confused. And I think it's useful as an exploratory tester to keep writing those things down, or to keep in some way externalising your decisions.
Something I found quite useful, you can't do it in all environments, but I have my own office so I can, was actually keeping audio notes. So for some projects I actually video recorded everything, so I had a recording of all the monitors I had, and I just spoke aloud throughout the whole thing. I'm going to do this test because, and I'm expecting this, or I'm not expecting that. And I was saying things that I would never have taken the time to write down. And also, I found it didn't interrupt my thought process, whereas writing things down
can be a big interruption.
By the time you finish writing, it's like, what was I doing? Whereas when I was talking, actually, it didn't interrupt the flow at all. And then later on, when I went back in order to investigate things, I was looking at previous videos, I found I said things I didn't recall saying that were really useful, that explained why I was doing the tests. So just seeing the video of what I did, it was useful, but it was much more useful to have that explanation, the running commentary, including things like when you were taken by surprise, like, wasn't expecting that, which again you might not write down. It was really useful retrospectively.
That would be interesting to try. I mean, I guess if you get on with things like the Apple voice transcription, if it can understand what you're saying, none of them ever understand what I'm saying. But if they can understand what you're saying, that might be a useful thing. Exactly. That's why I write everything down.
Sound more English, but
I think that doesn't help. But that's why I write everything down. But that might be a useful thing to have on the side.
Yeah, it'd be good to just be able to look back at the differences between you when you're speaking out loud and the notes you've taken, and see the things that you're actually missing.
Yeah, I think that'd be a useful experiment. Haven't done that.